She said she needed someone who understood real artistic vision, then walked away with a travel photographer who promised her the world. I met Aria during our final semester at University of Nevada, where I was grinding through my aerospace engineering degree while she pursued her dream of becoming a professional food stylist for magazines and high-end commercial shoots. I'd spent 4 years buried in calculus, thermodynamics, and propulsion theory, living in the engineering library and surviving on energy drinks and determination, but watching her transform ordinary ingredients into museum-quality displays that brands would pay thousands to photograph made me realize there was an entire creative universe I'd never considered. Her Instagram feed looked like modern art exhibitions, perfectly arranged charcuterie boards that cast dramatic shadows across marble surfaces, cocktails that seemed to glow from within like liquid jewels, desserts so intricate they belonged in galleries rather than stomachs. I was completely captivated by her passion and precision, the way she could spend 3 hours adjusting the angle of a single garnish until it caught light exactly right, how she talked about color theory and visual texture with the same intensity one discussed fluid dynamics and structural engineering principles. We started dating that winter during finals week, bonding over late-night study sessions in the library's quiet corners where I'd work through complex engineering problems while she practiced plating techniques on whatever ingredients she could afford from her part-time job at a trendy campus coffee shop. She'd bring me perfectly crafted lattes with foam art that made me feel guilty drinking them, and I'd help her carry heavy textbooks filled with culinary photography that she studied like sacred texts. Our study dates became elaborate productions where she'd document our simple meals with the same care professional photographers brought to magazine shoots, teaching me to notice details I'd never considered, how steam rose from hot food, the way sauces pooled and reflected light, the geometric patterns created by carefully arranged ingredients. By graduation, we were already planning a future where my steady engineering career would provide stability while she built her unpredictable creative portfolio, and I genuinely loved the idea of supporting someone whose work brought beauty and artistry into the world. After college, we moved into a luxury apartment in downtown Las Vegas that cost $2,400 monthly, a significant stretch on my starting salary of $68,000 but worth every penny for the kitchen lighting and counter space she needed for her professional shoots. The apartment had floor-to-ceiling windows that provided natural light throughout the day, essential for her photography work, and a spacious kitchen island where she could set up elaborate food arrangements without feeling cramped. I covered our rent, utilities averaging $340 monthly in the desert heat, and her equipment purchases that arrived like Christmas presents every few weeks, $800 professional lighting kits that transformed our dining room into a photography studio, $600 specialized camera lenses that captured textures invisible to regular cameras, backdrop materials and props that slowly took over our bedroom closet and spare bathroom. The investment seemed substantial, but I calculated it as building equity in our shared future, watching her client base grow from local restaurants' social media posts to regional magazine features that paid $1,500 per shoot. I didn't mind the financial strain because I believed we were building something meaningful together, creating a foundation where her creative success would eventually balance my practical contributions and we'd become the kind of power couple who supported each other's dreams unconditionally. Those first months felt magical, like playing house with someone whose artistic vision made even our mundane grocery shopping feel like research expeditions for her next photo shoot. She'd spend 20 minutes selecting the perfect bunch of asparagus, explaining how different varieties photographed under various lighting conditions, teaching me to see food as art medium rather than mere sustenance. Our apartment became a laboratory where she experimented with new techniques, and I learned to navigate around photography equipment and appreciate the creative process that went into every single image she produced. Weekend mornings became collaborative efforts where I'd help set up lighting while she arranged ingredients, both of us working toward creating something beautiful that would represent her growing brand and artistic vision. 3 years into our relationship, Aria's food styling work finally gained real momentum through collaborations with high-end restaurants and magazine features, but success brought changes I hadn't anticipated or prepared for emotionally. She started attending exclusive industry mixers and creative workshops almost nightly, networking events at upscale venues like rooftop bars and gallery spaces where aspiring artists mingled with established professionals over craft cocktails and small plates that cost more than our weekly grocery budget. I was genuinely proud of her growing reputation and didn't mind eating dinner alone most evenings, reading engineering journals while reheating whatever she'd prepared earlier, but I began noticing subtle shifts in her behavior and priorities that made me question where our relationship fit into her expanding professional world. Her social media presence evolved from showcasing her food art to posting cryptic philosophical content about authentic creative expression and photos from trendy locations I'd never heard of: underground speakeasies with exposed brick walls, pop-up art installations in converted warehouses, intimate dinner parties hosted by influential photographers whose work appeared in Vogue and National Geographic. Her captions became increasingly abstract, filled with quotes about breaking free from conventional thinking and embracing artistic risk that felt subtly directed at our stable, planned lifestyle and my practical approach to building our future together. I started screenshotting some of her posts, not from jealousy but from confusion, trying to understand when our quiet evening routines and weekend hiking trips had become symbols of creative limitation rather than peaceful contentment. A travel photographer named Ethan started appearing frequently in her conversations around this time, someone who documented extreme culinary experiences worldwide for magazines and luxury travel publications, underground speakeasies in Tokyo where master bartenders created molecular cocktails, pop-up restaurants in Icelandic glaciers where renowned chefs prepared 7-course meals using only local ingredients, street food markets in remote villages where traditional techniques created impossible flavors from basic ingredients. She described his work with an enthusiasm I rarely saw anymore when discussing our own relationship or future plans, her eyes lighting up as she scrolled through his Instagram feed of exotic locations and impossible food presentations that combined artistry with adventure in ways her Las Vegas shoots couldn't match. Aria became increasingly protective of her phone during these months, a device that had previously been completely shared between us for everything from restaurant reservations to weekend planning. She started taking mysterious calls in our bedroom with the door locked, conversations that could last an hour or more while I watched television alone, claiming they were discussing collaborative artistic projects that she described only in vague terms about pushing creative boundaries and exploring new visual storytelling techniques. When I'd ask specific questions about these projects or offer to help with planning or logistics, she'd deflect with explanations about how the creative process couldn't be rushed or analyzed too systematically, making me feel like my engineering mindset was somehow incompatible with understanding her artistic evolution. Our intimate connection deteriorated gradually but noticeably as she'd come home energized from her networking events, buzzing with inspiration and new ideas, talking rapidly about revolutionary approaches to food photography and connections she was making with established artists. But when I tried to reconnect physically or even engage in meaningful conversation about our future together, she claimed exhaustion and needed space to process all the creative input she was receiving. Our bedroom conversations shifted from planning weekend trips and discussing marriage timelines to her describing industry politics and artistic theories I couldn't relate to, leaving me feeling like a spectator in my own relationship. I found myself competing with an invisible presence that seemed to validate parts of her identity I couldn't access, despite my genuine efforts to show interest in her expanding professional world and attend gallery openings that featured work by photographers she admired. She made it increasingly clear that my practical engineering mindset couldn't appreciate the artistic revolution happening in her career, treating my questions about specific projects or timeline concerns as evidence that I didn't understand the organic nature of creative collaboration. The woman who used to explain every aspect of her work with excited detail now spoke about her projects in protective generalities, creating distance that felt both professional and personal in ways I couldn't quite articulate but definitely felt in our daily interactions. The irony of timing still amazes me when I think about those final weeks. I spent 2 months planning what I thought would be the perfect surprise to reconnect us and remind Aria why we worked so well together, only to have her use our anniversary dinner as the setting for systematic emotional demolition that felt rehearsed and calculated. I'd booked us an exclusive wilderness photography retreat in the Canadian Rockies for $5,800, a luxury experience that included helicopter tours over pristine mountain ranges, access to a professional darkroom where she could develop film shots of untouched landscapes, and guided aurora borealis shoots that combined her artistic vision with my love of technical precision and natural phenomena. The retreat required full payment upfront with a zero refund policy, representing months of me skipping lunches at work, avoiding my own hobbies like drone photography and weekend hiking trips, and carefully budgeting every expense to save money for what I believed would be a transformative experience for our relationship. I'd researched every detail obsessively, the way I approached complex engineering projects, choosing dates that aligned with optimal Northern Lights activity based on solar weather patterns, and booking the premium cabin with panoramic mountain views that would provide perfect natural lighting for her photography work. I imagined how her face would light up when I revealed the surprise over dinner at Chez Laurent, the same French restaurant where we'd celebrated our first anniversary 3 years earlier, surrounded by the same intimate lighting and classical music that had made that night feel so magical and full of possibility. I'd even coordinated with the retreat organizers to include specialized equipment she'd mentioned wanting to try, medium-format cameras and telephoto lenses that could capture wildlife and landscapes with museum-quality detail. Instead, she used that familiar, romantic setting to deliver a devastating breakup speech with the kind of calculated precision I associated with her most professional photography shoots, every word chosen for maximum impact and clarity. She explained that she'd developed deep feelings for Ethan through their collaborative artistic projects and couldn't continue ignoring the connection they'd built through late-night conversations about creative vision and artistic authenticity. Her explanation felt rehearsed, like she'd practiced this conversation multiple times, and she seemed almost relieved to finally voice thoughts that had clearly been building for months while I'd been planning surprises and saving money for our future. She framed our 4-year relationship as fundamentally incompatible with her evolving creative vision, painting me as someone too focused on security and conventional planning to understand the spontaneous, adventurous artistic life she needed to live authentically. According to her carefully prepared speech, my love of systematic planning and financial stability represented everything she was trying to escape in order to become the artist she was meant to be. She described feeling suffocated by our predictable routines and weekend hiking trips, claiming that my practical approach to life had unconsciously limited her creative potential and made her settle for safe artistic choices instead of pursuing the kind of boundary-pushing work that would establish her reputation in competitive markets. The most shocking part wasn't even the breakup itself, which I'd sensed coming through her growing distance and secretive behavior, but her expectation that I would still take her on the Canadian retreat as friends, claiming she needed time away from Las Vegas to process her feelings for Ethan and figure out her next creative steps without the pressure of our romantic relationship clouding her judgment. She presented this idea as though it were completely reasonable, explaining that the retreat represented exactly the kind of artistic adventure she needed to explore her authentic creative voice, and canceling would be wasteful given how much thought and money I'd invested in planning it. Her entitled assumption that I'd continue funding her personal growth journey, even after she'd chosen someone else, revealed a level of self-centeredness that made me realize how one-sided our relationship had truly become over the past year. I maintained perfect composure throughout that entire devastating dinner, even paying the $180 check one final time as Aria outlined her vision of our new friendship and how the Canadian retreat could be a healing experience that would help both of us transition into whatever came next in our separate lives. Something about her entitled assumption that I'd continue funding her life transitions triggered a clarity I hadn't felt in months, cutting through the confusion and self-doubt that had been building as she grew more distant and secretive. I realized that arguing or pleading would only validate her belief that she was doing me some kind of favor by offering friendship as consolation prize, treating our 4-year relationship like a business partnership that could be renegotiated rather than a deep emotional connection that she was choosing to abandon. That very night, while she stayed at her friend Ashley's apartment to give us both space and probably celebrate her newfound freedom with wine and validation, I packed everything I owned with the systematic precision I brought to engineering projects. I worked methodically through our shared apartment, separating my belongings from hers with careful attention to avoiding any disputed items or shared purchases that might create future contact opportunities. I left behind the expensive coffee machine we'd bought together, the artwork we'd collected from local galleries, and even books I'd owned before our relationship if they'd been integrated into our shared library, ensuring a completely clean break from our intertwined lives that wouldn't require negotiation or ongoing communication. I moved in with my work colleague Marcus Rodriguez, who had a spare bedroom in his downtown condo and understood the value of keeping explanations brief and avoiding unnecessary emotional processing. Marcus was a fellow aerospace engineer who'd been through his own difficult divorce 2 years earlier, and he provided exactly the kind of steady, uncomplicated living situation I needed without pressure to discuss feelings or analyze what had gone wrong. His place was a refreshingly masculine space focused on functionality rather than aesthetics, clean lines, minimal decoration, high-quality basic furniture that served its purpose without making artistic statements. I immediately took 3 weeks of accumulated vacation time, something I'd been saving for our eventual honeymoon but now needed to process what had just happened and figure out what I actually wanted from life moving forward. During those weeks, I rediscovered my passion for drone photography that had been slowly pushed aside during our relationship, as Aria had always found my technical hobbies less interesting than her artistic pursuits. I spent entire days exploring Nevada's desert landscapes, driving to remote locations I'd researched online and capturing aerial footage of hidden canyons, rock formations, and wildlife habitats that tourists never found because they required hiking and patience to access. The technical precision required for perfect drone shots, calculating wind patterns and weather conditions, adjusting camera angles and flight paths, timing flights with optimal lighting conditions for landscape photography felt like meditation after months of trying to decode Aria's increasingly cryptic emotional needs and navigate the politics of her creative social circle. Each successful shot represented a small victory that depended entirely on my own skills and preparation, rather than trying to anticipate someone else's changing moods and priorities. I started posting my best images on a photography Instagram account I'd abandoned years earlier, and the positive response from other drone enthusiasts reminded me that I had my own creative talents that didn't require constant validation or explanation. Through a drone photography forum focused on wildlife conservation, I met Jade Chin, a wildlife conservation specialist who spent her weekends documenting endangered species habitats for environmental organizations and research institutions. She worked for the Nevada Department of Wildlife, coordinating protection efforts for desert ecosystems and monitoring animal populations that most people never knew existed in our state. Jade appreciated both my technical precision with camera equipment and my willingness to spend 4 hours sitting motionless in uncomfortable positions waiting for the perfect shot of a desert fox or rare bird species, qualities that Aria had always found boring and obsessive rather than admirable. While Aria was presumably processing her feelings with Ethan and exploring her authentic creative voice through whatever collaborative projects they were pursuing, I was learning that meaningful connections could develop naturally through shared interests and mutual respect, without constant analysis or dramatic declarations about artistic compatibility. Jade and I started as photography partners who coordinated weekend expeditions to document wildlife in remote locations, but gradually developed a friendship based on genuine appreciation for each other's dedication and expertise rather than romantic attraction or physical chemistry. I handled our shared finances methodically during this period, approaching the dissolution of our financial partnership with the same systematic approach I brought to engineering calculations. I closed our joint savings account that contained $4,100 in wedding funds we'd been accumulating over 2 years of careful budgeting and future planning, giving Aria her proportional $900 contribution with a simple handwritten note wishing her well in her new creative journey and requesting no further contact about financial matters. The remaining $3,200 represented money I'd contributed from my engineering salary, and I transferred it into a new personal account that would fund whatever adventures I chose to pursue independently, starting with upgrading my drone photography equipment and planning solo travel to locations I'd always wanted to explore. Ethan's enthusiasm for their relationship apparently evaporated within weeks once the thrill of their secret affair disappeared into the mundane reality of actual partnership, leaving Arya scrambling both personally and professionally in ways I only learned about through mutual friends much later. According to reports that filtered back to me through our shared social circle, their collaborative artistic projects had been more about romantic fantasy than practical creative work, and once they were actually free to be together openly, Ethan realized that Arya's artistic vision and lifestyle expectations didn't align with his nomadic travel photography career that required constant movement and minimal possessions. She had reduced her client commitments significantly during those final months we were together, turning down several high-profile magazine contracts and restaurant collaborations to focus on what she described as revolutionary artistic projects with Ethan that were supposedly going to transform food photography by combining it with travel documentation and adventure storytelling. These mysterious projects, which had justified her secretive behavior and late-night planning sessions, apparently consisted mostly of elaborate fantasies about exotic photo shoots and international travel that had no concrete funding or practical foundation to support actual implementation. Without my financial stability covering her basic living expenses, the $2,400 monthly rent, $340 in utilities, $600 monthly car payment for her Lexus, insurance, groceries, and discretionary spending that had totaled nearly $4,000 monthly, Arya faced the full weight of Las Vegas's cost of living on an income that had never been sufficient to support her luxury lifestyle independently. Her food styling work, while artistically impressive, had only generated between $2,800 to $3,500 monthly in irregular payments, requiring my engineering salary to bridge the gap that allowed her to maintain the professional image she believed was necessary for attracting high-end clients. Her social media presence, previously professional and polished with carefully curated food art that attracted premium brands and restaurant partnerships, devolved into a chaotic mix of inspirational quotes about betrayal, artistic authenticity, and thinly veiled personal drama that made potential clients deeply uncomfortable. Posts about toxic people holding back creative souls, cryptic references to learning who really supports your dreams, and passive-aggressive comments about people who prioritize money over authentic artistic expression created an unprofessional image that luxury brands actively avoided when selecting photographers and stylists for their marketing campaigns. Several major contracts were quietly canceled with vague explanations about shifting marketing directions and budget reallocations, but the real reason was clearly her increasingly erratic online presence that reflected personal instability rather than professional competence. The photography equipment I'd helped her purchase over 3 years, those expensive lighting kits, specialized camera lenses, backdrop materials, and professional props that had cost nearly $8,000 total, had to be sold piece by piece to cover rent and basic expenses, destroying the professional setup that had taken years to build and represented her ability to compete for high-paying commercial work. The loss of equipment forced her to accept lower-paying gigs that didn't require professional lighting or specialized lenses, restaurant social media posts, and small local events that paid $200 to $400 rather than the $1,500 plus magazine features she'd been building her reputation around. Her artistic vision, which had seemed so important when she was breaking up with me to pursue authentic creative expression, became a luxury she couldn't afford when faced with choosing between paying rent and maintaining her artistic integrity by only accepting projects that aligned with her evolved aesthetic standards. Her attempts to contact me through mutual friends became increasingly desperate and manipulative, starting with casual inquiries about my well-being and work projects, then escalating to elaborate stories about realizing her mistake and needing closure to move forward with her artistic career. Friends reported conversations where she would spend hours analyzing our relationship and wondering if she'd been too hasty in ending things, describing a growing realization that stability and artistic support were more important than passionate creative collaboration that lacked practical foundation. She seemed genuinely shocked that I hadn't fallen apart without her, as if my continued stability and apparent happiness threatened some narrative she'd constructed about our relationship where I was supposed to be the one who couldn't function independently. According to mutual friends, she'd expected to hear reports of me struggling with loneliness, falling behind at work, or desperately trying to win her back with increasingly elaborate gestures, scenarios that would validate her decision while also confirming her importance in my life and ability to inspire that level of devotion and dependency. Aria's contact attempts escalated dramatically when she discovered through Instagram that I was spending time with Jade, whose wildlife conservation account featured photos from our weekend camping trips and drone photography expeditions that clearly showed two people building something genuine and collaborative together. Her social media stalking, which I only learned about later through friends who reported her obsessive monitoring of my online activity, revealed that she was screenshotting and analyzing every photo I posted for evidence of romantic involvement and comparing Jade's appearance and professional accomplishments to her own artistic credentials and physical attributes. The realization that I wasn't mourning our relationship or waiting around for her return triggered territorial behavior that transformed her previous friendly reconciliation attempts into desperate manipulation with an edge of genuine panic and possessiveness. She somehow tracked down my work number at Henderson Aerospace Solutions and left increasingly unhinged voicemails that alternated between sobbing apologies about throwing away the best thing in her life and angry accusations about how quickly I'd replaced her with someone who didn't understand my complexity or appreciate my generous nature the way she had during our 4 years together. Her messages revealed a disturbing possessiveness and entitlement that I'd never fully recognized during our relationship, but now seemed obvious in retrospect. She claimed that 4 years together meant she knew the real me better than any new person ever could, describing intimate details about my personality, habits, and insecurities as evidence that our connection was irreplaceable and that I was making a terrible mistake by choosing someone so different from her artistic sensibilities and creative understanding. She seemed unable to comprehend that someone might genuinely prefer different qualities in a partner, treating my relationship with Jade as temporary rebellion against our inevitable future together rather than a conscious choice based on compatibility and mutual respect. The voicemails became increasingly erratic and manipulative, with Aria describing her financial struggles and professional setbacks as consequences of losing my support and stability, while simultaneously demanding to know what Jade offered that she couldn't provide better given our shared history and deep emotional connection. She alternated between self-pity about her current circumstances and angry accusations about me abandoning someone who had sacrificed her artistic independence to build a life together, completely rewriting the history of our relationship to cast herself as the victim of my selfish decision to prioritize a superficial new romance over our meaningful long-term partnership. When those voicemails failed to elicit any response, I listened to them with Marcus, who found them simultaneously entertaining and concerning as examples of manipulative behavior he recognized from his own divorce experience. She made the catastrophic decision to confront me directly at my workplace during lunch hour when she knew I'd be in the building. Her appearance at Henderson Aerospace Solutions created an immediate scene that was witnessed by colleagues, clients visiting for project meetings, and my supervisor, forcing building security to intervene in what became a public display of unstable behavior that threatened my professional reputation. The scene she created in our professional lobby was absolutely mortifying, as security had to escort her out while she screamed about me ruining everything we'd built together for someone who didn't deserve the life she'd planned and the vacation I'd originally intended for her. Her possessive fury and complete sense of entitlement were fully exposed as she demanded to know what Jade offered that she couldn't, insisting that our shared history, the money I'd invested in her career, and the Canadian retreat I'd booked specifically for her artistic development meant something more than whatever shallow connection I thought I'd found with a woman who worked with animals instead of creating beautiful art. Her public breakdown included accusations about me being manipulated by someone who couldn't possibly understand my needs the way she did, mixed with threats that I'd regret choosing practical compatibility over passionate artistic collaboration and that I was throwing away something irreplaceable for a relationship that would never have the depth and creative synergy we'd developed over 4 years of building our careers together. She referenced specific private conversations and intimate moments as evidence of our deep connection, creating an uncomfortable situation where personal details of our relationship became public knowledge among my professional colleagues. The incident forced me to file a formal complaint with building security, have a deeply embarrassing conversation with my supervisor about personal matters affecting workplace safety, and send emails to clients who had witnessed the confrontation to reassure them that the situation was personal rather than professional and wouldn't impact project deadlines or team stability. Fortunately, my colleagues understood that sometimes relationships end messily, and the professional consensus was that I'd handled an unstable situation with appropriate restraint and maturity, but the experience highlighted how Aria's inability to accept our breakup was becoming genuinely problematic rather than merely annoying. 2 weeks after the workplace incident, I decided to use the Canadian retreat booking for myself and Jade, transforming what was supposed to be a romantic getaway with my ex into an adventure with someone who genuinely appreciated my thoughtful planning and attention to detail without treating it as evidence of controlling behavior or lack of spontaneity. Jade was thrilled about the helicopter tours and aurora photography opportunities, approaching the trip with scientific curiosity about documenting wildlife in pristine mountain environments and excitement about combining her conservation work with my drone photography skills to create educational content about endangered ecosystems. Unlike Aria, who would have treated the retreat as a luxury experience she deserved and an opportunity for Instagram content that showcased her lifestyle, Jade saw it as a chance to collaborate on meaningful conservation photography while experiencing one of the world's most spectacular natural environments together. She insisted on contributing financially to the trip despite my explanation that it was already paid for, ultimately covering our meals and additional equipment costs because she believed in equal partnership and didn't want to feel like she was taking advantage of my planning efforts or financial resources. When Aria somehow discovered our travel plans through mutual social connections, probably Ashley, who still followed both of us on Instagram and couldn't resist sharing dramatic updates about our situation, she made one final desperate attempt at disruption by ambushing us at McCarran Airport, intercepting us in the departure terminal before we could board our flight to Calgary. Her appearance was shocking and concerning. She was clearly sleep-deprived with frantic energy that made other travelers uncomfortable, wearing excessive makeup that couldn't hide exhaustion and stress, dressed in expensive clothes that looked wrinkled and hastily assembled like she'd thrown them on after sleeping in her car. She launched into a rambling, increasingly hysterical explanation about how Ethan had been emotionally manipulative and using her for temporary entertainment, describing how she was beginning to realize she'd made a terrible mistake leaving someone who truly understood commitment, financial responsibility, and building stable foundation for artistic careers. Her speech felt rehearsed but desperate, like she'd practiced these arguments but couldn't deliver them coherently under pressure, combining genuine remorse about our breakup with continued insistence that our romantic relationship had simply run its natural course and evolved into something deeper than conventional partnership. She maintained that her feelings for Ethan had been a temporary distraction from our real connection, arguing that 4 years of shared history and deep emotional understanding couldn't be replaced by someone I'd only known for a few months, regardless of how compatible Jade and I seemed on surface level. Her logic was simultaneously apologetic and possessive, acknowledging mistakes while refusing to accept that I might have genuinely moved on or found someone better suited to my personality and life goals than she had been during our increasingly strained final year together. Her public breakdown in the busy terminal included possessive accusations about me making the biggest mistake of my life by choosing someone who'd never know me the way she did, mixed with threats that I'd regret abandoning someone who'd sacrificed her artistic independence to build a life with me and understood my quirks and insecurities better than any new person possibly could. She referenced specific intimate conversations and personal details about my family relationships, work stress, and future dreams as evidence that our connection was irreplaceable and that I was throwing away something profound for superficial compatibility with someone who worked in a completely different field. Several people from our former social circle witnessed this scene, including her friend Ashley, who had apparently driven her to the airport and was trying unsuccessfully to calm her down, and Marcus, who had come to see me off and was observing the situation with the detached interest of someone who'd experienced similar dramatic behavior during his own divorce proceedings. Jade stood beside me with quiet dignity throughout Aria's breakdown, neither intimidated nor interested in engaging with the drama, occasionally squeezing my hand reassuringly but otherwise maintaining calm composure that contrasted sharply with Aria's escalating hysteria. As we finally boarded our flight hand in hand, leaving Aria's angry promises about how I'd come crawling back and realize what I'd lost echoing through the terminal while Ashley tried to console her, I felt only liberation and excitement for the authentic partnership I was building with someone who'd chosen to be there without conditions, expectations of financial support, or demands that I prove my love through expensive gestures and lifestyle maintenance. The weight of constantly trying to meet someone else's evolving expectations and artistic standards lifted completely, replaced by anticipation for sharing experiences with someone who appreciated both planning and spontaneous discovery. The Canadian Rockies turned out to be everything I'd hoped for and more, not because of the spectacular scenery or perfect aurora displays that exceeded even my carefully researched expectations, but because I was sharing it with someone who appreciated both the systematic planning that made it possible and the spontaneous moments of wonder we discovered together during our week of hiking, photography, and wildlife observation. Jade's scientific knowledge enhanced every aspect of the trip, from identifying bird species during our helicopter tours to explaining geological formations that created the dramatic landscapes we photographed, while her genuine enthusiasm for my drone photography skills and technical expertise made me remember why I'd originally fallen in love with combining technology and artistry. We spent hours collaborating on conservation photography that would support her wildlife research while creating beautiful images that showcased my technical skills, working together with the kind of natural partnership that had been missing from my relationship with Aria for at least the final year we were together. Instead of competing for attention or validation, we complemented each other's strengths and created something more meaningful than either of us could have achieved independently, whether documenting endangered species habitats or capturing aerial footage of pristine mountain wilderness that few people would ever experience firsthand. The trip became a turning point where I realized that real compatibility meant finding someone whose goals and values aligned naturally with mine, rather than trying to force artistic understanding or convince someone to appreciate qualities they fundamentally didn't value, and I returned to Las Vegas knowing that I'd found exactly the kind of partnership I wanted to build my future around, someone who'd chosen to be there because she genuinely enjoyed my company rather than what I could provide, financially or professionally.